Mark Thompson stood on the front porch of his new house and smiled. The moving truck had just pulled away and boxes were stacked everywhere inside. But he did not care about the mess. This was it. This was their dream home. The house sat on Maple Street in Willowbrook Estates. It was a nice neighborhood with clean sidewalks and pretty houses. Every lawn was green and cut short. Every mailbox looked the same. Every house had the same color paint. It looked like a picture from a magazine. What do you think? Mark asked his wife Sarah as she walked up the driveway. Sarah looked around slowly. She had just finished her last day at the Navy base where she worked. Tomorrow she would start her shore duty assignment. That meant she could work from an office instead of being sent away on ships. She was tired of moving every few years. She wanted a normal life for a while. "It looks perfect," she said. Really perfect, and it did look perfect. Too perfect, maybe. But Sarah did not say that part out loud. The real estate agent had told them all about Willowbrook Estates. It was built 10 years ago. All the houses cost about the same amount of money. The people who lived here had good jobs and nice cars. The Homeowners Association made sure everything stayed clean and beautiful. The HOA keeps property values high, the agent had said. They have rules, but they are simple rules. Keep your grass cut. Keep your house painted. Do not park on the street overnight. Easy stuff like that. Mark had liked the sound of that. He worked from home doing computer programming. He wanted a quiet place where he could focus. Sarah had been harder to convince. She had lived in many places because of the Navy. She knew that places that looked too perfect often had problems hiding underneath. But the house was beautiful. It had 4 bedrooms, a big kitchen, and a yard for the dog they planned to get someday. The price was right. The schools were good, and Mark really wanted it, so they bought it. Now they were here, and Sarah had to admit it felt good. The neighbors had waved when they drove by. The mail carrier had stopped to introduce himself. An older woman from across the street had brought them cookies. "Welcome to the neighborhood," the woman had said. Her name was Mrs. Peterson. She was about 60 years old with gray hair and a kind smile. "You picked a great street. We all look out for each other here." That sounded nice to Sarah. She had moved so many times that she never got to know her neighbors well. Maybe this place would be different. The first week went smoothly. Mark set up his computer in the spare bedroom that would be his office. Sarah drove to her new job at the Navy office downtown. It was strange to wear regular clothes to work instead of her uniform. But it was also nice. In the evenings, they unpacked boxes and explored their new neighborhood. They found a good grocery store, a coffee shop, and a park with walking trails. Everything seemed normal and peaceful. The Homeowners Association had left a welcome packet in their mailbox. It was thick with papers about rules and fees and meeting schedules. Mark flipped through it quickly. Most of it seemed like common sense. Keep your property clean. Do not paint your house weird colors. Ask permission before making big changes. Look at this, Sarah said, reading over his shoulder. They have rules about what kind of flowers you can plant. Really? Mark looked at the paper. Only certain types of roses. No vegetable gardens in the front yard. Grass must be between 2 and 3 inches tall. Sarah frowned. That seems very specific. I guess they want everything to look the same, Mark said. That is probably why the neighborhood looks so nice. Sarah was not so sure, but she did not argue. They were new here. Maybe this was just how things worked in suburbs. The next Saturday, Mark decided to cut the grass for the first time. The previous owners had left an old lawnmower in the garage. It took him a while to get it started, but finally it roared to life. Cutting grass was harder than it looked. Mark had grown up in an apartment. This was his first house with a yard. He tried to make the line straight like he had seen in movies. He measured the grass height with a ruler to make sure it was right. When he finished, he was sweating and tired. But the yard looked good. The grass was green and even. It looked just like all the other yards on the street. Sarah came outside to look. "Nice job," she said. "It looks great." Mark felt proud. This was his house, his yard. He was becoming a real homeowner. That afternoon, they drove to the hardware store to buy supplies. They needed a new doormat, some light bulbs, and paint for the spare bathroom. It felt good to shop for their own place instead of living in Navy housing. "We should have a housewarming party," Sarah said as they drove home. "Invite the neighbors over. Get to know people." Mark liked that idea. He had always been shy, but Sarah was good with people. She could talk to anyone. That was one of the things he loved about her. They spent Sunday organizing their garage and hanging pictures on the walls. The house was starting to feel like home. Mark set up his computer and tested his internet connection. Everything worked perfectly. On Monday morning, Sarah left for work in her car. Mark made coffee and sat down at his computer to start his workday. This was going to be their new routine. Sarah would go to the office. Mark would work from home. In the evenings, they would cook dinner together and watch TV. It sounded perfect. But perfect things, Sarah knew from her years in the Navy, often were not as perfect as they seemed. There were always hidden problems. Always people who wanted to cause trouble. Always rules that were more complicated than they first appeared. She hoped this time would be different. She hoped Willowbrook Estates really was as peaceful and friendly as it looked. But deep down she had a feeling that their troubles were just beginning. Mark did not have those worries. He was happy and excited about their new life. He had no idea what was coming, none of them did. The first violation notice appeared on a Tuesday morning. Mark found it tucked under his windshield wiper when he went out to get the mail. The paper was official looking. At the top it said, Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association, violation notice in big red letters. Mark's heart started beating faster as he read it. Violation. Grass height exceeds community standards. Current height, 3.2 inches. Maximum allowed height, 3.0 inches. Fine, $50. You have 48 hours to correct this violation or additional fines will apply. Mark stared at the paper. He had cut the grass just 4 days ago. He had measured it carefully to make sure it was the right height. How could it be too long already? He got down on his knees in the front yard and pulled out a ruler. He measured the grass in several spots. It was exactly 3 inches tall in most places, maybe a tiny bit taller in others, but barely. This is crazy, he said out loud. He looked around the neighborhood. All the other lawns looked exactly the same height as his. Some even looked longer. Why was he the only one getting a violation notice? When Sarah came home from work that evening, Mark showed her the paper. $50, she said, for grass that is maybe a 1/4 inch too long. I do not understand it, Mark said. I measured it when I cut it. It was perfect. Sarah walked around their yard looking at the grass. Then she walked across the street to look at Mrs. Peterson's yard. Her grass is definitely longer than ours, Sarah said when she came back. And look at the house on the corner. Their grass has not been cut in over a week. Mark felt frustrated and confused. Should I call someone? The HOA office? Let me look at the papers they gave us when we moved in, Sarah said. They spent an hour reading through all the HOA documents. The rules were there, but they were written in confusing legal language. There were dozens of pages about grass height, mailbox colors, fence rules, and parking restrictions. Look at this, Sarah said, pointing to a section about fines. It says they can charge $50 for the first violation, $100 for the second, $200 for the third, and it keeps going up. That seems like a lot of money for grass that is a little too long, Mark said. And look here, Sarah continued reading. If you do not pay the fine within 30 days, they can put a lien on your house. Mark felt sick to his stomach. A lien? That means they could take our house? Technically, yes, Sarah said. But let us not panic. This is probably just a mistake. We will get it sorted out. The next morning, Mark cut the grass again. This time he set the mower to cut it even shorter. When he finished, he measured it carefully. 2.5 inches. Well within the rules. But 3 days later, another violation notice appeared. This time it was about their mailbox. Mailbox color does not conform to community standards. Required color, classic black. Current color, midnight black. Fine, $50. Mark could not believe it. He went outside and stared at their mailbox. It was black, just like every other mailbox on the street. How could there be different types of black? He called the phone number on the violation notice. Willowbrook Estates HOA office, a woman answered. Hi, this is Mark Thompson on Maple Street. I got a violation notice about my mailbox color, but I think there might be a mistake. Hold on, let me look up your file, the woman said. Mark could hear typing on a computer. Yes, Mr. Thompson, your mailbox was inspected and found to be non-compliant. But it is black, Mark said. Just like all the other mailboxes. The approved color is Benjamin Moore Classic Black number 219-10, the woman said. Your mailbox appears to be a different shade of black. Mark was speechless. Who could tell the difference between 2 different shades of black? How am I supposed to know what color paint was used? he asked. We just bought the house. The mailbox was already there. All homeowners are responsible for ensuring their property meets community standards, the woman said in a bored voice. You can purchase the correct paint at Miller's Hardware downtown. They have the approved color codes. This is ridiculous, Mark said. Sir, I'm just reading you the rules. If you want to dispute the violation, you can request a hearing with the board. Mark hung up the phone feeling angry and confused. He had never dealt with anything like this before. That evening, he told Sarah about the phone call. Different shades of black, she said. That is insane. The woman said I could request a hearing with the board, Mark said. Maybe I should do that, Sarah nodded. It cannot hurt to try. Maybe if you explain that you just moved in, they will be reasonable. Mark was not so sure, but he decided to try. He called the HOA office again and asked for a hearing. The woman scheduled it for the following Thursday evening. Over the next few days, 2 more violation notices appeared. One said their garden stones were the wrong type. The other said Mark's car was parked 6 inches too far from the curb. Mark measured the distance from his car to the curb. It was exactly where cars were supposed to park. He took photos to prove it. He measured the garden stones too. They looked exactly like the stones at other houses. It is like someone is watching our house with a magnifying glass, Sarah said, looking for any tiny thing they can complain about. But why? Mark asked. We are not bothering anyone. We have been good neighbors. Sarah had been wondering the same thing. In the Navy, she had learned to pay attention when things did not make sense. This felt personal, like someone had decided to target them specifically. Thursday evening came and Mark went to the HOA board meeting. It was held in the community center near the front entrance of Willowbrook Estates. About 15 people were there. Most of them were older, probably retired. They sat at a long table at the front of the room. Mark sat in a chair facing them, feeling like he was on trial. The president of the HOA was a woman named Carol Winters. She was about 50 years old with short blonde hair and sharp eyes. She wore a business suit even though it was evening. Mr. Thompson, she said, looking at a file in front of her. You have requested a hearing regarding several violation notices. Yes, Mark said. I think there have been some mistakes. Carol looked at him like he had said something stupid. Our inspections are very thorough, Mr. Thompson. We do not make mistakes. Mark tried to explain about the grass and the mailbox and the parking, but every time he spoke, Carol interrupted him. The rules are very clear, she kept saying. Every homeowner agreed to follow these rules when they bought their house. But other houses have the same problems, Mark said. Why am I the only one getting violation notices? We inspect all properties regularly, Carol said. If other homeowners are violating the rules, they will receive notices as well. But Mark had been watching. No one else on his street had gotten violation notices. He was sure of it. The hearing lasted 30 minutes. In the end, the board voted to uphold all the violations. Mark owed $200 in fines. He drove home feeling defeated and angry. When he told Sarah what happened, she got a look in her eyes that he had never seen before. This is not over, she said quietly. Mark did not know it yet, but his wife was already starting to think like the Navy intelligence officer she really was. The harassment got worse after the hearing, much worse. Mark paid the $200 in fines, hoping that would be the end of it. But Carol Winters was just getting started. The next violation notice came 3 days later. This time it was about Mark working from home. Violation. Operating a business from residential property. Commercial activity is prohibited in Willowbrook Estates. Fine. $100. Mark read the notice twice, then called the HOA office immediately. I do not operate a business, he told the same bored woman who always answered the phone. I work from home for a company in California. I just use my computer. Someone reported seeing delivery trucks at your house during business hours, the woman said, and lights on in your office during the day. Those were not delivery trucks, Mark said. That was UPS delivering a package. And of course my office light is on during the day. I am working. Working from home constitutes operating a business, the woman said. You will need to stop immediately or face additional fines. Mark could not believe what he was hearing. Half the people in this neighborhood probably work from home sometimes. This is 2024. People work from computers. I am just telling you the rules, sir. Mark hung up and immediately started reading through the HOA documents again. He read every single page, looking for anything about working from home. There was nothing. Not one word about it, he called back. I have read the entire HOA agreement, he said. There is nothing in there about working from home. The board interprets the rules as needed, the woman said. Commercial activity includes any work done for pay. That is not what the documents say. If you want to dispute it, you can request another hearing. Mark was starting to understand how this worked. Carol and her board could make up any interpretation they wanted. They would always vote to uphold their own decisions. It was rigged from the start, but he requested another hearing anyway. Maybe if he brought more evidence, they would listen to reason. While he waited for the hearing date, more violation notices kept coming, one every few days, sometimes two in one day. His doormat was the wrong color. His window blinds were not the approved type. He had too many lights on at night. He did not have enough lights on at night. His car had a small scratch that was unsightly. There were leaves on his driveway. Leaves. On his driveway. In the fall, when leaves were falling from trees everywhere, each violation came with a fine. $50, $100, some were even higher. Mark started keeping track in a notebook. After 2 weeks, he owed over $800. This is insane, Sarah said, looking at the latest stack of violation notices. They are making up rules as they go along. Mark had been trying to fix every violation as soon as he got the notice. He bought new window blinds. He painted his doormat. He swept his driveway twice a day. But it did not matter. New violations kept coming faster than he could fix the old ones. I think someone is watching our house, he told Sarah. Like, really watching it, all the time. Sarah had been thinking the same thing. She had started paying more attention when she left for work and came home. There was always someone around. Walking a dog. Getting mail. Working in a yard. Always someone who could see their house. At first she thought it was just coincidence. But now she was not so sure. The second hearing was even worse than the first. This time, Carol had a thick file full of photos and reports about Mark and Sarah's house. Mr. Thompson, Carol said, spreading photos across the table. Our inspections show a pattern of willful noncompliance with community standards. The photos showed their house from every angle. Their car, their mailbox, even pictures taken through their windows at night. You took pictures through our windows? Mark asked. We document all violations thoroughly, Carol said. These photos clearly show commercial activity taking place inside your home. One photo showed Mark sitting at his computer. Another showed boxes by his front door. A third showed him talking on the phone. That is me doing my job, Mark said. I am not running a business. I work for someone else. The covenant clearly states that Willowbrook Estates is for residential use only, Carol said. But it does not say anything about working from home, Mark replied. It says residential use only, Carol repeated. Working is not residential use. Mark felt like he was going crazy. So no one in this neighborhood can work from home, ever? That is correct. What about people who do their taxes at home? Or kids doing homework? Or someone who reads work emails? Carol's face got red. Do not be ridiculous, Mr. Thompson. You know exactly what this is about. But Mark did not know. He had no idea why Carol hated him so much. He had never met her before moving to Willowbrook Estates. He had done nothing to upset her. The board voted to uphold all the violations again. Mark now owed over $1,500. And they added new restrictions. He could not have any packages delivered to his house during business hours. He could not have his office light on between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. He had to remove his computer desk from the room with the window. When Mark got home that night, Sarah was waiting for him. She had made coffee and put all their HOA documents on the kitchen table. We need to talk, she said. Mark sat down heavily. He felt tired and defeated. They hate us, he said. I do not know why, but they hate us. I have been doing some research, Sarah said. I drove around the neighborhood today and took my own photos. She showed Mark pictures on her phone. Houses with grass longer than theirs. Mailboxes that were clearly different colors. Cars parked in the exact same place as Mark's car. Look at this house, she said, showing him a photo. Their grass is at least 4 inches tall. And this mailbox is brown, not black. So why are not they getting violation notices? Mark asked. That is what I want to find out, Sarah said. I also looked up Carol Winters online. Sarah had found Carol's Facebook page and LinkedIn profile. Carol worked for a property management company called Premier Home Services. Her husband owned the company. Look at this, Sarah said, showing Mark the company website. They specialize in HOA management and property sales. Mark read the website carefully. Premier Home Services helped HOAs collect fines and fees. They also helped people sell their houses quickly when they could not afford HOA costs anymore. You think this is about money? Mark asked. I think this is about getting us to sell our house, Sarah said. Look at the houses that have sold in this neighborhood in the last 2 years. Sarah had done her homework. 8 houses had been sold in Willowbrook Estate since 2022. All of them had been sold for less than market value. All of them had been bought by the same investment company. I bet if we dig deeper, we will find connections between that investment company and Carol's husband, Sarah said. Mark stared at the information Sarah had gathered. So they harass people until they cannot afford to live here anymore. Then their friends buy the houses cheap and sell them for a profit. That is what it looks like to me, Sarah said. For the first time since this whole thing started, Mark felt a spark of hope. If they could prove Carol was running a scam, maybe they could stop her. But Sarah was thinking bigger than that. She was thinking about all the other families who had been forced out of their homes. All the people who had suffered because of Carol's greed. In the Navy, Sarah had learned how to investigate complex problems. She knew how to gather evidence and build cases. She had contacts in law enforcement who specialized in white-collar crime. Carol Winters had no idea who she was messing with. But Sarah was going to show her. 3 weeks after the second hearing, Carol Winters played her final card. The letter arrived on a Friday morning, delivered by certified mail. Mark signed for it with shaking hands. The return address said, Legal Department, Premier Home Services. His stomach dropped before he even opened it. The letter was 2 pages long, full of legal words that made Mark's head spin. But the meaning was clear enough. Carol was threatening to foreclose on their house. According to the letter, Mark and Sarah now owed over $15,000 in fines, late fees, legal costs, and administrative charges. They had 30 days to pay the full amount or face legal action to force the sale of their home. Mark sat down hard in his kitchen chair. $15,000. Where had all that money come from? He got out his notebook where he had been tracking the violations. The actual fines added up to about $3,000, but the letter showed thousands more in late fees and legal costs. Fees he had never heard of before. Administrative processing fee, $2,500, legal review fee, $1,800, compliance, monitoring fee, $3,200. Mark had never agreed to any of these fees. He had never even been told about them. When Sarah came home from work, she found Mark sitting at the kitchen table staring at the letter. What is it? She asked, but she could tell from his face that it was bad news. Mark handed her the letter without saying anything. Sarah read it twice, her face getting harder with each word. When she finished, she set the letter down very carefully. They cannot do this, she said quietly. The letter says they can, Mark replied. It says we agreed to all these fees when we bought the house. Sarah got out their HOA documents again. She had read them so many times that she almost had them memorized. She flipped through the pages looking for any mention of the fees listed in the letter. None of these fees are in our agreement, she said. Not one, but they say we agreed to them. They are lying, Sarah said simply. Over the weekend, Sarah made some phone calls. She called a real estate lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. She called the state attorney general's office. She called a friend from the Navy who now worked for the FBI. What she learned made her very angry. The lawyer told her that HOAs could add new fees if the homeowners voted to approve them. But there had been no vote. Sarah checked all the meeting minutes posted on the HOA website. No new fees had ever been discussed or approved. The Attorney General's office told her that HOAs were required to follow specific legal procedures before foreclosing on a home. They had to provide detailed accounting of all charges. They had to give homeowners a chance to dispute the charges. They had to prove that the homeowners actually owed the money. Carol had done none of these things. Sarah's friend at the FBI was very interested in what she had to say. He told her that HOA foreclosure scams were becoming more common. Criminal organizations would take control of HOAs, then use fake charges to steal people's homes. If you can prove they are making up these fees, that is mail fraud, he told Sarah. That is a federal crime. Monday morning, Sarah called the HOA office. I want to see the detailed accounting for all the charges against our property. she told the woman who answered. You will need to submit a written request, the woman said. Fine. Where do I send it? To the legal department. The address is on your violation notices. Sarah sent the written request that same day. According to the law, they had to respond within 10 business days. 2 weeks later, she still had not heard anything back. She called again. I sent a written request for accounting information 2 weeks ago. I have not received a response. Let me check, the woman said. Sarah could hear typing. I do not see any record of that request. I sent it certified mail, Sarah said. I have the tracking number. Well, I do not have it here. You will need to send another one. Sarah knew they were stalling, but she sent another request anyway. This time she sent copies to Carol Winters personally, to the property management company, and to the HOA board members. While she waited for a response that she knew would not come, Sarah started digging deeper into Carol's background. She found that Carol had been involved in 3 other HOAs before Willowbrook Estates. In all 3 cases, there had been complaints about excessive fines and improper foreclosures. In one case, a family had sued the HOA and won, but by then, Carol had already moved on to a different neighborhood. Sarah also found connection after connection between Carol's family and the investment company that had been buying houses in Willowbrook Estates. Carol's brother-in-law was a partner in the investment company. Her husband's property management company had contracts with them. Her own sister worked as a real estate agent who specialized in quick sales for people facing foreclosure. It was a family business. They would take control of an HOA, harass homeowners with fake violations and illegal fees, force them to sell their houses cheap, then buy the houses through their investment company and sell them for full market value. Sarah estimated they had stolen at least $2 million in property value from families in Willowbrook Estates alone. The more she learned, the angrier she got. These people were not just stealing money. They were destroying families, forcing people out of their homes, taking away the biggest investment most people ever made, and they were doing it to her and Mark right now. On Thursday, Carol called a special HOA meeting. The notice said it was to discuss the Thompson compliance issue. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening. They are going to vote to foreclose on our house, Mark said when he read the notice. Let them try, Sarah said. Mark looked at his wife with surprise. Over the past few weeks, Sarah had been acting different. More focused, more determined. She spent hours on her computer and made phone calls in private. She asked detailed questions about everything Carol had done. Mark was scared and confused. But Sarah seemed calm and confident, like she knew something he did not know. What are you planning? He asked her. Sarah smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that made Mark glad she was on his side. I am planning to end this, she said, once and for all. The meeting notice said homeowners could bring guests if they notified the board in advance. Sarah sent an email saying she would be bringing one guest. She did not say who. The guest would be. Carol probably thought it would be a lawyer or maybe a family member for moral support. Carol had no idea what was coming. Tuesday evening arrived. Mark put on his best shirt and tie. Sarah disappeared into their bedroom for a long time. When she came out, Mark barely recognized her. She was wearing a dark blue uniform covered with ribbons and medals. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun. Her shoes were polished to a perfect shine. She wore the bearing of someone used to command. Ready? She asked. Mark stared at his wife. He had seen her in uniform before, but never like this. Never looking so official and intimidating. You look like you could arrest someone, he said. Sarah's smile was sharp as a knife. That is exactly how I want to look. While Carol prepared for her meeting to destroy the Thompsons, Sarah was building a federal case. Sarah had not told Mark everything she had been doing. She did not want to get his hopes up until she was sure. But over the past 2 weeks, she had been very busy. Her contact at the FBI was Agent Michael Torres. They had worked together 3 years ago on a case involving fraud at a Navy contractor. Torres specialized in white-collar crime, especially schemes involving real estate and mortgage fraud. When Sarah first called him about the HOA situation, Torres had been interested but cautious. HOA disputes were usually civil matters, not federal crimes. But the more Sarah told him, the more interested he became. The fake fees could be mail fraud, he had told her. If they are using the Postal Service to send fraudulent bills, that is a federal crime. And if they are working together to steal property, That could be racketeering. Sarah knew about racketeering laws from her Navy training. RICO was designed to go after organized crime families, but it also applied to any group of people who worked together to commit crimes. Torres had given Sarah a secure email address and asked her to send him everything she had found: bank records, HOA documents, meeting minutes, violation notices, legal threats, everything. Sarah had spent 3 days organizing all the evidence into a clear timeline. She showed how Carol's family had taken control of the Willowbrook Estates HOA, how they had systematically targeted certain homeowners with fake violations, how they had added illegal fees that were not in any homeowner agreement, how their investment company had bought the houses that people were forced to sell. But Torres needed more than just Sarah's research. He needed proof that could hold up in court. "We need financial records," he told Sarah during one of their phone calls. "Bank statements, contracts, wire transfers. We need to show the money trail." "How do I get that?" Sarah asked. "You probably cannot," Torres said, "but you might not have to. If this is as big as you think it is, we might be able to get search warrants." Torres had been working with the local FBI office to investigate Sarah's claims. They had found that Carol's pattern went beyond just Willowbrook Estates. She had done the same thing in at least 6 other neighborhoods, across 3 different states. The FBI estimated that Carol's network had stolen over $10 million in property value from homeowners over the past 5 years. "She has to be stopped," Torres told Sarah, "but we need more evidence before we can move." That is when Sarah got an idea, a risky idea that could get her in serious trouble if it went wrong. "What if I could get them to admit what they are doing?" she asked Torres. "What if I could get it on recording?" "That would be very helpful," Torres said carefully. "But I cannot ask you to put yourself in danger." "I am not in danger," Sarah said. "They think I am just a scared homeowner. They have no idea what I actually do for a living." Sarah had not told Carol or anyone else at the HOA about her military background. As far as they knew, she was just Mark's wife who worked at some office downtown. They had no idea she was a naval intelligence officer with security clearance and training in investigation and surveillance. "What are you thinking?" Torres asked. Sarah explained her plan. Torres was quiet for a long time after she finished. "That is very risky," he said finally. "If they figure out what you are doing—" "They will not figure it out," Sarah said. "Trust me, the plan was simple but dangerous." Sarah would wear a recording device to the HOA meeting. She would try to get Carol and the other board members to talk about their real plans. With luck, they would say something incriminating that could be used as evidence. Torres arranged for Sarah to get a professional recording device from the FBI office. It was tiny, designed to be hidden in clothing. The sound quality was excellent, and it could record for up to 6 hours. Sarah practiced with the device for 2 days. She learned how to turn it on and off without anyone seeing. She practiced talking in a way that would get the best sound quality. Most importantly, she studied exactly what questions to ask to get Carol talking. The day before the meeting, Sarah met with Torres one more time. "Remember," he told her, "you are not a federal agent. You are just a homeowner asking questions. Do not push too hard. Let them talk. What if they get suspicious?" Sarah asked. "Then you stop immediately and leave," Torres said. "This evidence is not worth putting you in danger." But Sarah was not worried about danger. She was thinking about all the families who had lost their homes because of Carol's greed. She was thinking about the elderly couple who had been forced to sell the house they had lived in for 20 years. She was thinking about the young family with 3 kids who had lost their savings and had to move in with relatives. Carol Winters was a criminal. She had been stealing from innocent people for years, and Sarah was going to stop her. On the morning of the meeting, Sarah put on her uniform and attached the recording device. It was hidden so well that even Mark could not see it. She looked at herself in the mirror. In her uniform with her ribbons and medals, she looked like exactly what she was: a professional military officer who had dedicated her life to protecting people from threats. Carol Winters was about to learn that she had picked the wrong family to mess with. But first, Sarah had to gather enough evidence to destroy Carol's entire operation. She checked the recording device one more time. The battery was fully charged. The memory card was empty and ready. "Let us go," she told Mark. As they drove to the community center, Sarah went over her plan one more time in her head. She would let Carol do most of the talking. She would ask innocent questions that would make Carol reveal her real motives. She would be patient and careful, and with luck, by the end of the evening, she would have enough evidence to put Carol Winters in federal prison. The community center parking lot was full when they arrived. Word had gotten around about the meeting. Many neighbors wanted to see what would happen to the Thompsons. Sarah and Mark walked toward the building. Sarah could feel the weight of the recording device under her uniform. Everything depended on what happened in the next 2 hours. As they reached the front door, Sarah saw Carol Winters waiting inside. Carol was smiling, confident that she was about to win her biggest victory yet. She had no idea that her criminal empire was about to come crashing down. The community center was packed. Sarah had never seen so many neighbors at an HOA meeting before. Word had spread about the Thompson situation, and people were curious to see what would happen. Carol Winters sat at the head table with 4 other board members. She wore a dark business suit and had papers spread out in front of her. She looked confident and ready for battle. Most of the neighbors sat in folding chairs facing the board table. Sarah noticed that people avoided looking at her and Mark directly. They whispered to each other and glanced over quickly, then looked away. Sarah recognized the look. It was fear. These people were afraid that if they showed support for the Thompsons, they might become targets too. "Good evening, everyone," Carol said, calling the meeting to order. "We are here tonight to discuss a serious compliance issue with the Thompson property at 1247 Maple Street." She looked directly at Mark and Sarah as she spoke. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson have repeatedly violated our community standards. Despite multiple notices and opportunities to correct these violations, they have refused to comply with our rules." Sarah reached under her jacket and quietly turned on the recording device. The tiny green light told her it was working. "The board has determined that the Thompson property is in violation of our covenants in multiple areas," Carol continued. "Lawn maintenance, property appearance, unauthorized commercial activity, and failure to maintain community standards." She held up a thick folder. "We have documented over 30 separate violations in the past 2 months. The total fines and fees now exceed $15,000. A few people in the audience gasped at the number. $15,000 was a lot of money for most families. "Mr. Thompson," Carol said, "you have requested this hearing to dispute these charges. The floor is yours." Mark stood up nervously. His hands were shaking as he held his notes. "Thank you," he said. "First, I want to say that Sarah and I have tried to be good neighbors. We bought our house here because we wanted to be part of this community." He talked about the grass violations, explaining how he had measured carefully and cut the lawn multiple times. He showed photos of other houses with longer grass that had not received violations. He talked about the mailbox issue, pointing out that his mailbox looked exactly like every other mailbox on the street. He talked about the working from home issue, explaining that he was not running a business, just doing his regular job on his computer. Mark did a good job explaining their side of the story. But Sarah could see that Carol was not really listening. She was looking at papers and checking her watch. When Mark finished, Carol nodded dismissively. "Mr. Thompson, I appreciate your concerns," she said, "but the facts are clear. Our inspection reports document multiple violations of community standards." She opened her folder and pulled out photographs. These photos clearly show grass that exceeds the maximum height, a mailbox that is not the approved color, evidence of commercial activity in a residential zone. Sarah looked at the photos. They were the same ones Carol had shown at the previous hearing, but now Sarah noticed something she had missed before. The photos all had date and timestamps, but the dates were wrong. Some of them were taken before Mark had even received violation notices. Some were taken on days when Mark had not been home. Sarah realized that Carol had been planning this harassment campaign from the very beginning. She had been taking surveillance photos of their house from the day they moved in. "The board has also discovered additional violations," Carol continued. "Mr. Thompson has been operating a business from his home without proper permits. This is clearly prohibited by our residential-only covenant." "What kind of business?" asked one of the board members. "Computer programming," Carol said. "He has been conducting commercial transactions from his home office. We have evidence of business calls, deliveries, and commercial equipment." Sarah almost laughed out loud. "Commercial equipment? Mark's computer and printer. The board has determined that immediate action is necessary," Carol said. "The violations have continued despite multiple notices. The fines and fees have accumulated to an unacceptable level." She paused dramatically and looked around the room. "Therefore, the board is prepared to begin foreclosure proceedings against the Thompson property." Several people in the audience gasped. Mrs. Peterson, the nice elderly woman from across the street, looked shocked. "Foreclosure?" she said. "For grass that was too long?" "Mrs. Peterson," Carol said sharply, "this is not about grass. This is about willful disregard for community standards. This is about maintaining property values for all homeowners." Sarah saw her opening. She stood up slowly, letting her uniform be seen clearly for the first time. The room went completely quiet. Everyone stared at her crisp navy dress blues, her ribbons and medals, her bearing of command. "Ma'am," Sarah said politely to Carol, "may I ask a question?" Carol looked surprised. She had clearly not expected Mark's wife to speak, especially not in military uniform. Of course," Carol stammered. "You mentioned that the fines and fees total over $15,000, Sarah said. "Could you please explain how that amount was calculated?" Carol looked down at her papers. Late fees, administrative costs, legal review fees, compliance monitoring fees. "I see," Sarah said. "And when did the homeowners vote to approve these fees?" "Excuse me? According to state law, HOAs must have homeowner approval before implementing new fees." "When was the vote taken?" Carol's face started to turn red. "The board has the authority to implement necessary fees for compliance purposes." "Actually, that is not correct," Sarah said calmly. "State Statute 47-9-102 requires a majority vote of homeowners for any new fees or assessments. Could you please show me the meeting minutes where this vote was recorded?" The room was dead silent. Everyone was staring at Sarah like they had never seen her before. Carol fumbled through her papers. The board interprets the covenants to allow necessary administrative fees. "I have read the covenants very carefully," Sarah said. "There is no mention of administrative fees, or legal review fees, or compliance monitoring fees." Sarah's voice was still polite, but there was steel underneath it. "In fact, the only fees mentioned in the covenants are annual dues and special assessments approved by homeowner vote." Carol was starting to look panicked. "Mrs. Thompson, I do not know what you think you are doing, but I am asking questions about the legal basis for these charges," Sarah interrupted. "As is my right as a homeowner." She looked around the room at the other neighbors. "I think everyone here deserves to understand how these fees were calculated, and whether they were legally implemented." "You are out of order," Carol snapped. "Actually, she is not," said one of the other board members. Sarah did not know his name, but he looked uncomfortable. "Homeowners have the right to question fees and charges." Sarah smiled slightly. "Thank you. I have one more question." She looked directly at Carol. "Mrs. Winters, what is your relationship with Premier Home Services?" Carol went white. What does that have to do with anything?" "Premier Home Services is the company that manages this HOA," Sarah said. "But it is also the company owned by your husband. Is that correct?" "That is none of your business." "Actually, it is," Sarah said, "because Premier Home Services also has contracts with Pinnacle Investment Group, the same company that has purchased 8 houses in this neighborhood over the past 2 years." "Sarah, let that sink in for a moment." "Houses that were sold by families who could not afford HOA fines and fees." The room erupted in whispers. Neighbors were turning to each other with shocked faces. "This meeting is over," Carol said, standing up quickly. "Actually," Sarah said, her voice cutting through the noise like a sword, "I think this meeting is just getting started." Carol Winters tried to end the meeting, but the neighbors were not having it. They wanted answers. "Sit down, Carol," called out Mrs. Peterson. "Let her finish." "This is highly irregular," Carol protested, but she sat down. She could see that she was losing control of the room. Sarah remained standing. In her uniform, she commanded attention and respect. Everyone in the room was looking at her, waiting to hear what she would say next. "My name is Lieutenant Commander Sarah Thompson," she said clearly. "I am a naval intelligence officer currently assigned to shore duty." She let that sink in. Naval intelligence. The neighbors looked impressed and a little intimidated. "For the past month, I have been investigating the business practices of this HOA and its management company," Sarah continued. "What I have found is deeply disturbing." She reached into her jacket and pulled out a folder. Mark had never seen it before. He wondered how long she had been preparing for this moment. "I have documented evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering," Sarah said. Carol shot to her feet. "You cannot make accusations like that." "I will sue you for slander." Sarah looked at Carol with the calm confidence of someone who knew she held all the cards. Mrs. Winters, everything I am about to say is documented fact. I have bank records, contracts, emails, and recorded phone calls. I have financial statements showing exactly where the money has gone. Sarah opened her folder and pulled out the first document. Premier Home Services has charged this HOA over $200,000 in management fees over the past 3 years, she said. But the actual work performed is minimal. Most of that money has gone directly into the personal accounts of you and your husband. That is not true, Carol said, but her voice was shaky. It is completely true, Sarah replied. I have the bank statements to prove it. She pulled out another document. Furthermore, Premier Home Services has been adding illegal fees to homeowner accounts. Fees that were never approved by the board or the homeowners. Fees that exist only to generate revenue for your company. Sarah looked around the room at the neighbors. How many of you have received violation notices in the past year? About half the people in the room raised their hands. And how many of you were charged administrative fees or legal fees that seemed excessive? Most of the same hands stayed up. Those fees are illegal, Sarah said simply. They violate state law and the HOA covenants. Every penny of those fees must be returned to the homeowners. Carol was looking desperate now. You cannot prove any of this. Actually, I can, Sarah said. She pulled out a thick stack of papers. I have copies of all the financial records for this HOA going back 5 years. I have contracts showing the relationships between Premier Home Services, Pinnacle Investment Group, and several real estate companies. Sarah's voice got harder. I have evidence that you have been systematically targeting certain homeowners with excessive violations in order to force them to sell their houses. Those houses were then purchased by companies connected to your family at below-market prices. The room was completely silent now. Everyone was staring at Carol, waiting for her response. This is a coordinated criminal enterprise, Sarah continued. Under federal law, this constitutes racketeering. It is also mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft. Carol tried one more time to regain control. Even if any of that were true, which it is not, you have no authority here. You are just another homeowner. Sarah smiled. It was not a friendly smile. You are right that I have no authority as a homeowner, she said. But I do have authority as a federal intelligence officer who has uncovered evidence of crimes involving multiple states and federal laws. She reached into her jacket again and pulled out her military identification. I have been working with the FBI on this investigation for the past 2 weeks, she said. Agent Michael Torres of the Financial Crimes Unit has been very interested in what I have found. Carol sat down hard. All the color had drained from her face. Tomorrow morning, Sarah continued, the FBI will be executing search warrants on Premier Home Services, Pinnacle Investment Group, and several associated companies. They will also be freezing bank accounts and seizing financial records. Sarah looked directly at Carol. Agent Torres asked me to give you a message. You have 48 hours to resign from this board and make full restitution to the affected homeowners. If you do that, the FBI might consider reducing the charges against you. Charges, Carol whispered. Multiple federal felonies, Sarah said. Mail fraud carries up to 20 years in federal prison. Racketeering carries up to 20 years. Wire fraud is another 20 years. And that is just the federal charges. The state will probably file additional charges for theft and fraud. Sarah closed her folder and looked around the room at the other board members. Anyone who knowingly participated in this scheme will also face charges, she said. But anyone who cooperates with the investigation and helps make things right for the homeowners might be able to avoid prison time. One of the board members, a man named Robert Chen, raised his hand shakily. I did not know about any financial irregularities, he said. I just voted on violations that Carol brought to us. I did not know where the money was going. Then you should resign from the board immediately and cooperate with the investigation, Sarah told him. The FBI will want to interview everyone who served on the board during the time these crimes were committed. Within minutes, 3 of the 5 board members had announced their resignations. Only Carol and one other person remained silent. Sarah turned her attention back to Carol. Mrs. Winters, I have one more thing to tell you. Carol looked up with fearful eyes. This entire conversation has been recorded, Sarah said. Everything you have said tonight will be turned over to the FBI as evidence. Carol's mouth fell open. You recorded this meeting without permission? Actually, I did have permission, Sarah said. From the FBI. This was an authorized investigation into suspected federal crimes. Sarah had gotten everything she needed. Carol's admission that the fees were necessary administrative costs. Her inability to produce homeowner votes approving the fees. Her obvious knowledge of the connections between the various companies. Most importantly, Carol had not denied any of the accusations. In the legal world, silence could be interpreted as admission. "The meeting is now adjourned," Sarah announced. "Mrs. Winters, you should contact a criminal defense attorney immediately. You are going to need one." As people started to leave, neighbors crowded around Sarah and Mark. Mrs. Peterson hugged Sarah with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "My husband and I were so scared we were going to lose our house. We got violation notices too, but we were afraid to fight them." Other neighbors shared similar stories. The young couple with 3 kids had been saving money to move out of the neighborhood because they could not afford the escalating fines. The elderly man at the end of the street had been thinking about selling his house rather than deal with the HOA harassment. Carol Winters sat alone at the board table, staring at nothing. Her criminal empire had just collapsed in the span of 1 hour, and Sarah was just getting started. The FBI raids began at 6 in the morning. Sarah and Mark watched from their kitchen window as 3 black SUVs pulled up to Carol Winters' house across the neighborhood. Agents in blue jackets marked FBI knocked on the door with a search warrant. At the same time, other teams were hitting Premier Home Services, Pinnacle Investment Group, and the homes of Carol's family members involved in the scheme. Sarah's phone rang. It was Agent Torres. "We got everything," he said. "Computer files, bank records, contracts, emails. Everything you said would be there." Sarah felt a deep satisfaction. "What happens now?" "Now we build the prosecution case," Torres said. "Carol Winters is going to federal prison for a very long time." The investigation moved quickly after that. With all the evidence Sarah had gathered, plus the financial records seized in the raids, the FBI was able to piece together the entire criminal operation. Carol and her husband had been running the scam for over 8 years. They had taken control of HOAs in 12 different neighborhoods across 4 states. They had stolen over $15 million in property value from innocent families. The scheme always worked the same way. Carol would get elected to HOA boards by promising to maintain property values. Then she would systematically target certain homeowners with excessive violations and illegal fees. When families could not pay, they were forced to sell their houses quickly and cheaply. Carol's investment company would buy the houses at below market prices. After making minor improvements, they would sell them for full market value. The profits were split between Carol's family members and their business partners. It was a brilliant scam, and it had worked for years because most people did not know how to fight back against HOA harassment. But Carol had made one fatal mistake. She had targeted a naval intelligence officer. 3 weeks after the raids, Carol Winters was arrested at her home. The charges included racketeering, mail fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit theft. Her husband and brother-in-law were arrested the same day. The local news covered the story extensively. "HOA president charged in $1 million fraud scheme" was the headline in the newspaper. The story explained how Carol had used her position to steal money from homeowners across multiple states. Sarah was interviewed by the newspaper reporter. The article described her as a Navy intelligence officer who uncovered the scheme after her own family was targeted. But Sarah did not want to be the focus of the story. She wanted people to understand how HOA fraud worked and how to protect themselves from it. "This could have been prevented if homeowners knew their rights," she told the reporter. "HOAs cannot just make up fees whenever they want. They have to follow specific legal procedures, and if something seems wrong, homeowners should ask questions and demand documentation." The criminal case moved forward quickly. With all the evidence the FBI had gathered, Carol's lawyers advised her to plead guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence. Carol Winters was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Her husband got 8 years. Her brother-in-law got 6 years. Several other people involved in the scheme received shorter sentences or probation in exchange for cooperating with the investigation. But more importantly for the victims, the court ordered full restitution. All the illegal fees had to be returned to homeowners. The investment company had to pay damages to families who had been forced to sell their houses below market value. Mark and Sarah got back every penny they had been charged in illegal fees. So did all their neighbors. The total restitution in Willowbrook Estates alone was over $300,000. The impact went beyond just the money. Once Carol was gone, the neighborhood became a completely different place. A new HOA board was elected with proper oversight and transparency. They implemented new rules requiring homeowner approval for any fees or major decisions. They hired a different management company with a good reputation and clear contracts. Most importantly, the culture of fear that Carol had created was replaced by a sense of community cooperation. Mrs. Peterson was elected as the new HOA president. Her first act was to revise all the violation procedures to make them fair and reasonable. No more fines for grass that was a quarter-inch too long. No more harassment over trivial appearance issues. We want this to be a place where families feel welcome and safe, Mrs. Peterson announced at her first board meeting. Not a place where people are afraid of their own neighbors. Mark finally felt comfortable working from his home office without worry about violation notices. He and Sarah planted a vegetable garden in their backyard and adopted the dog they had always planned to get. Sarah continued her Navy career, but the experience with Carol had given her new insight into white-collar crime. She began volunteering with a non-profit organization that helped homeowners fight HOA abuse. There are probably hundreds of Carol Winters out there, she told Mark one evening as they sat on their front porch, watching neighbors walk their dogs, people who use their positions to take advantage of others. So what are you going to do about it? Mark asked. Sarah smiled. I am going to teach people how to fight back. 6 months later, Sarah published an article in a national magazine about HOA fraud and how to prevent it. The article was widely shared and led to new state laws requiring better oversight of HOA finances. She also created a website with resources for homeowners facing HOA harassment. The site included templates for legal documents, contact information for attorneys who specialized in HOA law, and step-by-step guides for investigating suspicious HOA activities. The website received thousands of visitors in its first month. Sarah started getting emails from homeowners all over the country who were dealing with problems similar to what she and Mark had faced. Many of them were able to resolve their situations using the information and resources Sarah provided. Some discovered financial irregularities in their own HOAs and reported them to authorities. Carol Winters had created a lot of misery for a lot of people, but in the end, her greed had led to changes that would protect thousands of homeowners from similar scams in the future. Mark and Sarah never forgot how close they had come to losing their home. But they also never forgot the lesson they learned about standing up to bullies and fighting for what was right. Their house in Willowbrook Estates became the home they had always dreamed it would be. The neighborhood was peaceful and friendly. The HOA operated fairly and transparently. Property values increased because people actually wanted to live there. And sometimes, when new families moved to the neighborhood, Mrs. Peterson would tell them the story of how Lieutenant Commander Sarah Thompson had saved their community from a criminal who tried to steal their homes. It became a neighborhood legend. The story of how one Navy wife in uniform had brought down an entire criminal empire with nothing but intelligence, determination, and the courage to ask the right questions at the right time. Carol Winters had thought she was targeting an easy victim. Instead, she had picked a fight with exactly the wrong person, and she had lost everything because of it.